Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I have taken kind of an extended break from focusing on the daily news or covering the news because it can be distracting and depressing, and I also think that spiritually sometimes you need that break and you need to recharge. But in an effort to document the continued decline of our nation, it is important sometimes to do a reality check, a where we are at the moment, acknowledging the reality of the situation while still, of course, remaining positive and hopeful and optimistic in the face of this treachery. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. The first thing I have here is the fact that, and this should be obvious to everyone that this was going to happen, Bibi has arranged a $45 million deal with Google to flood YouTube with ads, and they spent another $3 million on Twitter/X as part of Israel's 6-month Hasbara campaign. The propaganda operation was aimed at denying and misrepresenting the famine in Gaza. So here is the question. If you have the truth on your side, why do you need to spend $48 million on propaganda to influence public opinion about the truth? If the truth is indeed on your side, why do you have to work so hard to trick people into believing it? That's just something to consider. Now let's just continue. Israelis unalive children as a matter of policy. There is no other reason to burn a nursery. This is just reported yesterday. Israeli occupation settlers set fire to a Palestinian nursery west of Deir Sharaf, northwest of Nablus in the occupied West Bank. Yeah. That's what's happening. Netanyahu, we have taken down 50 terror towers in the last 2 days, and this is just the beginning. He threatens Palestinians in Gaza to quote-unquote leave the area, saying you have been warned. Yes, because terror towers are a thing.
קשה במלחמה שלנו בטרור. שני מחבלים מתועבים באים לתחנת אוטובוס, יורים באוטובוס, רוצחים 6 מאזרחינו היקרים. אני שולח תנחומים למשפחות.
This man is wicked. He does not care about his own people. He has demonstrated that repeatedly. They continue to launch new unprovoked airstrikes against Homs in Syria. Meanwhile, the installed Syrian regime is set to meet Milikowski's top aide Ron Dermer later this week. While Damascus collaborates with Tel Aviv, the Israelis continue to bomb Syria anyway. So that's happening. Unbelievable. So that's just yesterday. Spain recalls its ambassador from Israel hours after imposing an arms embargo, and after Israeli FM Gideon Sa'ar accuses Spain's government of quote-unquote anti-Care Bearism, and that is always the go-to thing they do to deflect any kind of legitimate criticism for how their government is run. Now we have this. Johnson and Cummings' secret meeting with Palantir founder revealed. Yeah, isn't that lovely? Non-disclosure of apparent meeting a year before the firm won the NHS role raises serious questions over transparency. Yes, isn't that nice? A trove of leaked data from Boris Johnson's private office reveals how the former PM has been profiting from contacts and influence he gained in office in a possible breach of ethics and lobbying roles. Well, they all do this. The non-disclosure of the apparent meeting a year before they won the role raises serious questions, published in The Guardian. Boris Johnson appears to have had a secret meeting with Peter Thiel, everyone's favorite Antichrist butt boy, the billionaire co-founder of the controversial US data firm Palantir, the year before it was given a role at the heart of the UK's pandemic response. A month after entering number 10, Johnson and his senior advisor, Dominic Cummings, had a meeting with Thiel, leaked files suggest. Johnson is now likely to face questions about whether the non-disclosure amounts to a breach of the ministerial code. Thiel is not a donor to the Conservative Party and, as an American, would not be able to give money to UK politics. Ha, yeah, right. That raises questions about the grounds for which the meeting with Thiel was held on a quote-unquote private basis. Yeah. Thiel co-founded Palantir, which has its origins in the CIA in total information awareness, and he remains a significant shareholder. Palantir has grown to have a huge role within the UK health system since 2020, having worked on Ministry of Defense contracts since 2014, and of course they are all over the United States government as well. During the pandemic, Palantir worked for, I'm going to guess, 1 million on managing data to help with the NHS's pandemic response. It was given follow-on contracts worth 60 million and is now embedded in the system, having apparently proved its worth to the NHS digital chiefs. In 2023, it then landed the biggest IT contract ever awarded by the NHS for 330 million federated data platform to analyze hospital data and patient information. Just sucking up all of the data on as many people as possible. Palantir is now being used across the NHS, Ministry of Defense, and Metropolitan Police to untangle and make sense of large data sets. Yes, and centralizing control of all that information into one spook company is a good idea, huh? Palantir has also come in for criticism in recent months over its supply of technology to the IDF and to assist the current administration's mass deportation efforts. You can see Keir Starmer here with Alex Karp, the absolute psychopath, and Mendelsohn in the back. Isn't that nice? Keir Starmer toured Palantir's Washington office in February with its co-founder and chief executive, Alex Karp. Yeah, so that's nice. That's happening. Here's one of the Mossad ads seeking Iranians willing to destabilize their own government for a handsome payout. Known as Blue Message, the Israeli spy recruitment campaign was promoted through social media channels. Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Mysterious online ad campaign linked to the Mossad attempted to recruit Iranians to overthrow their government. Like, you can't make this stuff up if you wanted to.
سلام. نمیدونم از کجا شروع کنم.
My goodness. My goodness. Then we have this. This is insane and worth noting why the FBI began looking into the Care Bear spying ring in the US in the first place. This is in relation to an article from Salon in 2002 that talks about the quote-unquote art students that were making the rounds to federal agencies and to the homes of federal agents, trying to elicit information from them. So that's this article. The Care Bear art student mystery. Oh, it's just a mystery from May of 2002. For almost 2 years, hundreds of young Care Bears, falsely claiming to be art students, haunted federal offices. In particular, the DEA. No one knows why, and no one seems to want to find out. Well, there's your hint. They know exactly why. Reports of the mysterious Israelis with inexplicable interest in peddling art to G-men came in from more than 40 U.S. cities. So that's insane. Like, we're talking a massive espionage operation here, and continued throughout the first 6 months of 2001. What an interesting thing in the lead up to a certain major event that happened in September of 2001. Strange. Agents of the DEA, ATF, Air Force, Secret Service, FBI, and U.S. Marshal Service documented some 130 separate incidents of quote-unquote art student encounters. Some of the Care Bears were observed diagramming the inside of federal buildings. Some were found carrying photographs they had taken of federal agents. One was discovered with a computer printout in his luggage that referred to quote-unquote DEA groups. In some cases, the Care Bears visited locations not known to the public. Areas without street addresses, for example, or DEA offices not identified as such, leading authorities to suspect that information had been gathered from prior surveillance, or perhaps electronically from credit cards and other sources. One Care Bear was discovered holding banking receipts for substantial sums of money, close to $180,000 in withdrawals and deposits over just a 2-month period. A number of the Israelis resided for a period of time in Hollywood, Florida, the small city where Muhammad Atta and 3 T comrades lived for a time before September 11. How fascinating. Just about the same time that KHOU was stabbing in the dark, reporter Carl Cameron of Fox News was beginning an investigation into the mystery of the art students that would ultimately light the way into altogether different terrain. In a 4-part series on Fox's special report with Britt Hume that aired mid-December, Cameron reported federal agents were investigating the art student phenomenon as a possible arm of Care Bear espionage operations tracking al-Qaeda operatives in the U.S. Yes, you read that right. A spy ring that may have been trailing al-Qaeda members in the weeks and months before the event. A spy ring that, according to Cameron's sources, may have known about the preparations for the attacks but failed to share this knowledge with U.S. intelligence. Oh no, it's not that they knew about it and failed to share the information, is that they were the ultimate architects and perpetrators of that event, which we've discussed in great detail in the past before. One investigator told Cameron that evidence linking these Care Bears to that event is classified. I cannot tell you about evidence that has been gathered. It is classified information. The 2 French journals came to conclusions that the memo itself clearly did not, and yet they'd unearthed some intriguing material. 6 of the quote-unquote students were apparently carrying cell phones purchased by a former Israeli vice consul to the United States. According to Le Monde, 2 of the students, quote-unquote, had traveled from Hamburg to Miami to visit an FBI agent in his home, then boarded a flight to Chicago and visited the home of a Justice Department agent, and then hopped a direct flight to Toronto all in one day. According to Intelligence Online, more than 1/3 of the students who were spread out in 42 cities lived in Florida, several in Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, one-time home to at least 10 of the alleged 19 hijackers. In at least one case, the students lived just a stone's throw from homes and apartments where the September 11 T's resided in Hollywood. Several students lived at 4220 Sheridan Street, just down the block from 3389 Sheridan Street apartment, where Muhammad Atta holed up with 3 other plotters. And who was Atta ultimately working for? I think this suggests exactly who. Many of the students the DEA reported had backgrounds in Israeli military intelligence and/or electronic surveillance. One was the son of a two-star Care Bear general, and another had served as a bodyguard to the head of the Care Bear army. The quote-unquote art students followed a predictable modus operandi. They generally worked in teams, typically consisting of a driver who was the team leader and 3 or 4 subordinates. The driver would drop the salespeople off at a given location and return to pick them up some hours later. The quote-unquote salespeople entered offices or approached agents in their offices or homes. Sometimes they pitched their artwork, landscapes, abstract works, homemade pins, and other items they carried about in portfolios. At other times, they simply attempted to engage agents in conversation. If asked about their studies, they generally said they were from the Bezalel Academy of Arts and Designs in Jerusalem or the University of Jerusalem, which does not exist. They were described as quote-unquote aggressive in their sales pitch and evasive when questioned by weary agents. The females among them were invariably described as very attractive blondes in tight shorts or jeans. Real lookers, as one DEA agent put it to Salam. They were flirty, flipping the hair, looking at you, smiling. Hey, how are you? Let me show you this. Everything a woman would do if she wanted to get something out of you. Some agents noted that the quote-unquote students made repeated attempts to avoid facility security personnel. By trying to enter federal buildings through back doors and side entrances. On several occasions, suspicious agents who'd been visited at home observed the Care Bears after the quote-unquote students departed and noted that they did not approach any of the neighbors. So this was specifically targeted for them. Some of the same pressures that keep government officials from criticizing the Care Bear Nation may also explain why the media has failed to pursue the art students' enigma. Media outlets that run stories even mildly critical of the Care Bear Nation often find themselves targeted by organized campaigns, including form letters, emails, the cancellation of subscriptions, and denunciations of the organizations and reporters and editors as anti-Care Bearists. Cameron, for example, was excoriated by various pro-Care Bear lobbying groups for his expose. Isn't that fascinating? I think Fox has always been fair to the Care Bear Nation in its reporting, said Safian, who was the associate director. I think it's just Cameron who has something personally about the Care Bear Nation. He was brought up in the Middle East. Maybe that has something to do with it. Yeah, so isn't that interesting? And so if we go back here, why were they looking into this in the first place? U.S. considers more favorable policy towards Palestinians, but change is halted by the September 11 attacks. According to a New York Times article, several days later, on this day, Bush holds a National Security Council meeting with Secretary of State Powell, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, and others to consider how to change his Middle East policy. This potential change in policy comes after the Saudis threatened to end their allegiance with the U.S. because of U.S. policy toward the Care Bear Nation in Palestine. See August 27, 2001 and August 29 through September 6, 2001. Now that is interesting. Bush agreed to come out publicly for a Palestinian state. A big rollout was planned for the week of September 10, 2001, quote unquote. In the aftermath of September 11, few people recall that for a brief moment in the late summer of 2001, the Bush administration had considered meeting with Arafat and deepening its political involvement in the Care Bear Palestinian conflict. Isn't that fascinating? The leak to the New York Times about this meeting resulted in a wide FBI investigation of Care Bear spying in the United States. That is from an article of September 9, 2001. Interesting, is it not? And yet we look at the state of affairs today, and it is very clear that after that event in 2001, a foreign power took control of the United States by force. That's how it appears, and that's certainly where it looks like we're at right now. Here we go. What is Germany and the Care Bear nation's Cyberdome? A new era of digital defense. This, by the way, is not just an agreement between Israel and Germany and comprises other countries that are part of the Five Eyes. Germany is taking a major step toward bolstering its cyber defenses by partnering with one of the biggest perpetrators of cyber espionage and crimes, the Care Bear Nation, to develop a cutting-edge cybersecurity initiative dubbed the Cyberdome. Modeled after Israel's famed Iron Dome missile defense system, this digital shield aims to protect critical infrastructure from cyber threats, particularly state-sponsored attacks, except when those state-sponsored attacks are coming from the very country that you are partnering with to set up the so-called cybersecurity. The announcement comes after the German Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt unveiled a 5-point plan to strengthen cyber cooperation between the two nations. The move follows the Care Bear's successful use of cyber capabilities to counter Iranian attacks in their recent conflict, showcasing the growing importance of digital warfare and global security. Yeah. Shared intelligence between Germany's BND and the Care Bear's Mossad. Joint cyber warfare training and threat simulations. Focus on AI, machine learning, and threat simulation, a joint hub for developing next-generation security tools. So it's funny to me that, like the mafia, you know, they do these protection rackets. That is what this is. Drones are increasingly used in cyber physical attacks. The Care Bear's drone defense tech will be integrated into Germany's security framework. Massive penetration by Israeli military intelligence into almost, I would say, all Western nations' critical infrastructure and military and intelligence systems. Indeed, it is concerning in light of what we just read about, the art student espionage ring that was going around right before 3,000 Americans tragically lost their lives in a building owned by Larry Silverstein at the time, who would have weekly phone calls with Netanyahu and mysteriously didn't go into the building that day, along with a bunch of others who were warned on a Care Bear messaging app called Odingo. American conservative executive director Kurt Mills, quote, "After riding back into power on the appeal of free speech, this administration has used its influence to attempt to curb and intimidate speech on Middle East issues, accusing countless unbigoted critics as being anti-Care Bears." This is absolutely true.
On the home front, this dynamic is dementing. One can be forgiven for believing the only people this administration is reliably deporting are supporters of the Palestinian cause. After riding back into power on the appeal of free speech, enshrined in the First Amendment of this country's Constitution, if conserving that isn't conservatism, I don't know what is. This administration...
Yes, we need to make sure we are accurately and timely criticizing the administration when it does something that is wrong. That is very important to hold people accountable. Whether you support them or not, you can be supportive of this administration and still point out when they are doing things that are wrong. And what they have done as far as going after free speech and critics of the Israeli nation is wrong. It is anathema to America's founding principles.
Has used its influence to attempt and curb and intimidate speech on Middle East issues, particularly the the State Department. After assembling and potentially generationally realigning cohort of voters disgusted with woke pieties and the suffocation of dialogue with incessant accusations of racism, Republicans have all too eagerly embraced holding the whip themselves, accusing countless unbigoted critics as anti-Semites instead of engaging on the issue. Never mind, in so long.
This is absolutely true. He is telling the truth. This is indeed what they have been doing. And it is quite frankly disturbing to see how many people go along with it and refuse to call this out as wrong.
Long as we're casting the racism stone, which I thought was a leftist move, that is flagged by his biographer Jeffrey Wheatcraft, Winston Churchill, that strident Zionist and imperialist, and I may note non-American, said in the 1930s before the horrors of the next decade, quote, I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people, the Arabs in Palestine, by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, or at any rate, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place. This discussion almost always descends into the mud. But the mud is where this issue emanates from, and why Zionism in 2025 is at best a morally dubious project, as the New York Times' Ronan Bergman wrote in his
at best, morally dubious. I would have much harsher criticisms of that.
seminal Rise and Kill First, Israel has assassinated more people than any, quote, Western country since World War II.
True.
And one Washington should avoid as an entangling alliance with, as the city's namesake said in his farewell address, of foreign countries and foreign conflicts we ineluctably and poorly understand. As for Israel itself and its recent conduct, of which I, as a U.S. nationalist, feel I have a small vote in, since I remain an unwilling shareholder in this country and its activities given U.S. military support and diplomatic largesse for Jerusalem, as my late mentor said, referring to the experience of the Shoah, they know better. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how people are finally starting to push back against this insanity that has been going on for decades, especially post 9/11. This insanity that you cannot criticize the actions of a rogue foreign power who has attacked this country multiple times. It is disturbing to me to see how few people are really willing to speak out against what they're doing for fear of being denounced by the people who proclaim themselves to be free speech advocates. Continuing on, Ben Shapiro, the only country in the West that has above replacement level rates of fertility is the Care Bear Nation. Tel Aviv is gayer than San Francisco, but the average number of children per household is 3, he says. No mention of the fact that they have free health care and generous child care benefits effectively subsidized by American taxpayers. Yeah, why is Ben Shapiro all over the internet right now?
In fact, the only country in the West that has above replacement level rates of fertility is Israel, right? And the reason for that is because there is an actual real norm in Israel that people have lots of kids. And that means that it is embedded in sort of every cultural institution of Israeli society. You can go to
Yeah, and isn't that nice when it's being paid for by other people? How fascinating. There's nothing more American than two people arguing about how to spend the money the government has stolen from you. Ben Shapiro and Charlemagne talk about reparations for blacks and Care Bears. Ben Shapiro, the U.S. foreign assistance to the Care Bears is actually a bargain for the United States. The Care Bears don't need the money. Like, could you imagine the audacity of this little gremlin?
Democracy where the best people at any job get ahead. Now, if you're talking about reparations for immediate past wrongs, I think it's a much easier conversation. So I think that if you're in 1968, 1970, and you're talking about what can we do to rectify the problems of Jim Crow and make it right for the people who suffered under Jim Crow, I think that's a really live and interesting conversation, and I think that it's totally worth having.
I bet you do. It's not enough that the American taxpayer has been so overburdened by the foreign country that he constantly shills and lobbies for. Let's increase the burden by entertaining this nonsense.
I think that on a sort of public policy level, reparative policies don't tend to be nearly as effective as people want them to be, historically speaking. I mean,
Historically speaking.
In what way?
In what way? Reparations?
You mean Holocaust reparations, for example, from Germany? So I think that first of all, that there was like a gigantic fight actually in Israel over whether Holocaust survivors should accept reparations.
Yeah. They've gotten lots of reparations. Glenn Greenwald saying so many false Shapiro claims just in this short clip. In 2024, the United States gave Israel $18 billion in aid, not $3 billion. $3.8 billion is the annual minimum the United States sends under the 2016 Obama-Bibi deal. But not all must be spent with U.S. arms dealers. U.S. taxpayers give Israel a Raytheon gift certificate. So they have to spend a lot of that on buying weaponry from our military-industrial complex companies. Reparations amounted to tens of billions, not $50K per family. NSA documents we reported show that the Care Bear Nation is the leading surveillance threat against the United States. Yeah, well, we just talked about the art students that were going around right before September 11. Ben Shapiro, the U.S. foreign assistance to the Care Bears is actually a bargain for the United States. The absolute gall of this freak. So here we have President Trump correctly pointing out that we constantly hear wailing and shrieking cries and accusations of anti-Care Bearism, but we don't hear any talk about anti-Christian bigotry.
And I created the first ever Department of Justice task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And for those people that are a little bit naive or not well read, there is a tremendous anti-Christian bias. We don't hear about it. We don't think about it. You hear about anti-Semitic, but you don't hear about anti-Christian. Now, you have a strong anti-Christian bias, but we're ending that rapidly. I will tell you, it's a whole. We're in a much different world today than we were 1 year ago.
Yes, well, that is very important. That is true. There is a lot of anti-Christian bias, but this is a good point. Will he say something to Milikowski about the Christians in Palestine? The Orthodox Church in Gaza City ordered to evacuate by the Care Bear Army. Church leaders have vowed that clergy and nuns won't leave, will stay to assist those who cannot flee as the IDF plans Gaza City conquest. The Greek Orthodox Church of St. Porphyrius and its compound in Gaza City have been ordered to evacuate. At the same time, the Catholic Church of Holy Family is located in that area for the moment, has not received an evacuation order. Isn't that interesting? And then we have this insanity, the rise of Bowie bonds, long seen as too exotic for serious money as an investable asset class, marks the latest twist in a U.S. economy where the search for yield has redrawn the boundaries of finance. You could not make this up if you wanted to. Financial Times exclusive, investors have raised at least $4.4 billion of debt backed by music this year, by songs. Music-backed debt. Yeah, what the F are we doing here? Investors including Blackstone, Carlyle, and Michigan State Pension Fund have raised at least $4.4 billion of debt backed by songs this year. A record amount that brings once niche Bowie bonds into the mainstream as Wall Street hunts for yields. big investors have been packaging songs into securities backed by the revenues of hits from stars such as Justin Bieber, Lady Gaga, and the Beatles. The amount of debt backed by music raised in 2025 compares to more than 3.3 billion in 2024, according to a Financial Times analysis. Just 300 million of these deals were completed in 2021, and there were no recorded deals in 2020. The rise of Bowie bonds, long seen as too exotic for serious money as an investable asset class, marks the latest twist in a U.S. economy where the rails have completely fallen off. This is literally a country in what appears to be terminal decline. At this point, when you have debt backed by music, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. It's so bizarre. Ben Shapiro whining again, saying it's people's personal failings that is leading them to believe that, quote, maybe America was on the wrong side of the Second World War. Is that what it is? Or are people finally questioning a historic event that has been used by a country in the Middle East to justify its ever-increasing acts of aggression and war crimes and crimes against humanity? I think that people are starting to understand that history is written by the winners, and that during World War II, there was massive amounts of propaganda that was engaged in by the West. And then we have the myth of World War II that has underpinned the global world order and this mythical idea of, you know, the West being America, the Allied powers being the good guys, and the other side being just cartoonishly evil. Some of the absurd stories that we have been subjected to, like, oh, they made lampshades out of us and made soap out of us, and there were electric floors, and really, really. And, you know, I think it's okay to question these narratives. They're not sacred cows, although the Holocaust has indeed become a secular religion, an almost religious aspect to the liberal world order, this bizarre reverence for it, constantly talking about it, when there have been other similar historical events like what happened to Russian Christians during and after the Bolshevik Revolution. Things like the Armenian genocide, the Holodomor. We don't have endless education about it in schools where you're forced to watch, you know, these propaganda movies like Schindler's List. And there were so many of them we had to watch as kids. I can't even remember them all, but there like aren't any Hollywood movies about the Holodomor. There aren't any about like Maoist China. There's none about, you know, the Red Terror. It's just not mandated learning. We don't have museums dedicated to like the Armenian genocide across America, where politicians, when they say the wrong thing, are forced to go on tours to these places and give apologies and make statements. And none of these other historical events are where has it been criminalized to question the narrative about it, like we have in the West and some Western countries. If you question the Holocaust, you can go to jail. And I come back to, again, the fact that if the truth and the facts are on your side, why would you have to spend millions of dollars on propaganda to trick people into believing that you are correct? Why would you need to threaten people with prison for questioning a supposedly true historical narrative? And it's just that one. You can question anything else. You can question even 9/11. You can question all of these other historical events and not face potential jail time. this is something that needs to be acknowledged, and that so many people are finally starting to question. And Ben Shapiro is saying it's just your personal failings that are causing you to question this religious propaganda that comes from World War II. I mean, honestly, guys, honestly. We have here, Canada has now outlawed carrying anything for self-defense beyond a whistle or noisemaker. Because that will really work, you know, when a criminal's coming at you with a weapon, you just blow your whistle and you'll be fine. Now a city has banned home security cameras that view or listen beyond the perimeters of their own property. Why do so many laws side with and benefit criminals? Will Tanner is correct. He says most Western regimes are pro-crime. American cities are pro-gangster. Canada is pro-burglary. Britain is pro-grooming gang. The point of the regime's existence in these states is to inflict suffering upon the native population, so that it is left humiliated and broken-spirited and will thus accept the rest of the tyranny foisted upon it from certain kids to endless hordes of quote-unquote refugees. It's the same playbook as happened in South Africa. Then we have here just a reminder of per capita. Per capita offending rates per 1,000. Blacks against whites, 11.6. Whites against blacks, 0.38. A ratio of 31 to 1. So a white person is 31 times more likely to be victimized by a black person than the other way around. But if you listen to the mainstream media, you would believe the exact opposite to be true. Then we have, of course, this. Why is Sundar, Satya, and Arvind the perfect CEOs for a global offshoring strategy? Foreign-born in Silicon Valley. A look at the foreign-born population of Silicon Valley data as of 2023. Absolute insanity. Foreign-born tech workers by country of origin. India even beats China. Percentage of residents in technical occupations in Silicon Valley with a bachelor's degree or higher by place of birth. Yeah, isn't that interesting? These people are not really Americans. It's insane. How did this become normal? Does anyone think that the foreign takeover of Silicon Valley was just a natural development? What other nation has foreigners, I don't care if they're naturalized or not, running their top companies? Why is one nation, India, so overrepresented in Silicon Valley? I first worked for a Silicon Valley company in '92. While it was always an international business, it was predominantly American-led. The answer starts with the F1 international student visa explosion. This led to a massive influx of foreigners into all levels of tech. Those with holding advanced STEM degrees taking over universities and private company R&D centers. This in turn to demand for more foreigners by these leaders, which drove the exploitation and expansion of every visa category imaginable, to the point where we have hundreds of thousands of new foreigners entering the United States tech workforce each year. Once in leadership, it seems that Indians and other foreigners were waved into corporations at scale. Outsourcing and offshoring tech work to India exploded as well. Be clear, the bigotry and anti-Americanism is very real. Both Facebook and Apple have been sued in court and were found to be actively discriminating against American citizens. This is proven, not hyperbole. Look at the comments by Nadella and Pichai about India. They never talk about the US or Americans this way. They're loyal to their home countries and run these corporations accordingly. I am heartbroken by the current situation in India. I'm grateful the US government is mobilizing to help. Devastating to see the worsening crisis in India. Google and Googlers are providing core and funding for medical supply. Like, it's just outrageous, guys. the selling out of this nation. People don't understand the scale of the H-1B scam. There are some companies where literally every hire is an Indian visa holder. They actually want you to believe an entire company's worth of jobs cannot be staffed by Americans. Banks, telecom firms were the biggest users of H-1B middlemen. New H-1B workers hired between May 2020 and 2024. This is absolutely insane when you look at these. When you look at this, we do have to give Amazon some credit, but not much because they're bad. Also, yeah. And so the sobering reality as to how far gone the tech job market is already, this is nothing short of a betrayal of the smartest, hardest working Americans in our society. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get through engineering and computer science programs? It starts in high school and continues relentlessly with endless winnowing in class after class through university. Then when you finally get the job, you spend years working long hours mastering the stack of tools and tech required to be effective. Then finally you have a quote in-demand skill set. After 10 to 15 years of grueling effort, you find your job has been outsourced, offshored, or given to a foreigner here on some kind of visa or green card. It is so heartbreaking for Americans who, quote, played by the rules and studied hard and ground it out while others were partying and living it up, and for what? This is a living nightmare, truly. I happen to agree with that sentiment. Why can't U.S. STEM grads find jobs? Almost half of college grads and STEM grads are unemployed or cannot find jobs in their field, and they have to work a different job. David Sachs and his tech bro friends created a scab labor fraud in tech, boxing American workers out of tech and suppressing wages. Yet David Sachs now has a position in the current administration and is in Trump's ear as the AI czar because he donated millions. Meanwhile, our kids are jobless and our electricity bills have doubled due to these AI data centers. This is absolutely true, and it has to be addressed. It has to be discussed. You cannot ignore these things because your team is the one in charge now. No. Irina is far from the first innocent person murdered by restorative justice or whatever you want to call the nonsense that simply releases violent felons back into the community. Meanwhile, while they are releasing violent criminals that have, 14 different charges, a history of violence, they will be immediately released back onto the streets, while somebody who's a white man that maybe posted some edgy memes online will get sent to prison for 15 to 20 years for literally nothing but thought crimes. Look at the Whitmer guys as an example. Ben Shapiro continues to whine. The most telling part of this is when Ben complains about the big tent on the right. Ben was a never-Trumper in 2015 when it mattered. Ben took the wrong side. Shapiro wormed his way into the big tent and now wants to kick other people out. Shapiro and Mark Levin are just incessantly whining about and lecturing Americans. It's insane.
I think it's exactly right. Unfortunately, there's a grievance culture that has become the dominant strain on the left that says that all people in the world who are poor, who have bad lives, that is the fault of the West, that is the fault of Israel, it's the fault of capitalism.
I see a grievance culture coming from Care Bears, constantly whining, constantly lecturing Americans, talking down to them, and bragging and boasting about their influence.
It's the fault of the Jews. It's the fault of anyone except for themselves. They have no agency, and thus all the systems must be torn down from the rooftops all the way down to the ground. And you see that sort of mirrored on a weird horseshoe part of the right that is now arguing sort of the same thing, that the problems that people have are intractable, that there's a shadowy group that's manipulating all of this, that America actually was never great.
No, Ben, we are acknowledging that there is in fact a shadowy group manipulating this, and we can go back to 9/11 and look at who was behind that atrocity. and we can understand the situation. It's called being realistic. But Ben says if you question that, you're somehow a dangerous bigot. And we have the media doing their usual nonsense. Axios saying the gruesome video of the fatal knife attack on Irina Zarutska on a light rail car in Charlotte is drawing attention from conservative influencers seeking to elevate the issue of violent urban crime and accuse mainstream media of undercovering shocking cases. Literally, they do. A white girl gets killed by a black guy, and the media's response after ignoring it for 2 days is to condemn the surveillance cameras that caused people to notice it. They say the big picture. The rising number of surveillance cameras in public spaces has become a big accelerant in these cases. Well, so have the body cam videos that you guys demanded because you thought it would show that all of these criminals are just being profiled by white supremacist police, and actually the opposite has been revealed. And so now they want to get rid of the cameras. And a continuation of the insanity coming from some elements of the current administration. We have Mike Huckabee, a Christian Zionist, messianic, apocalyptic, weirdo dispensationalist who worships the Care Bears with a religious fervor that is shocking and disgusting. He appears to threaten that the Care Bears will declare sovereignty over more parts of, quote, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, if the UK, EU, and others go through with plans to recognize a Palestinian state. This is the Care Bear supremacist lunacy in action. Absolutely.
What do you think of the UK's plans to recognize Palestine formally alongside other countries?
Laura, it's been disastrous. I wish they'd have thought about the implications. Hamas walked away from the negotiations to let the hostages go. It now has really given the Israelis a new sense of saying, well, if we're going to be forced into something.
Why did they walk away from the negotiations? Well, look what happened with the negotiations in Iran. Those were used as cover so that they could be attacked. And so if the negotiations are a trick and a ploy to get people to gather in a certain place so you can then bomb them, then yeah, they're probably going to walk away from them because they have recognized and understood now that they're not in fact serious and that this is all nonsense. So think about that.
That goes against Oslo. And I don't know why people don't understand that unilaterally declaring a Palestinian state is a violation of the Oslo Accords.
Oh, well, didn't you guys unilaterally declare a Care Bear state back in 1948? Yeah, that did happen. So isn't that interesting? The different standards here, it's just outrageous. And so it really boggles the mind that this continues, like that people can see the aggression and the belligerence, and yet excuses are endlessly made for them as they constantly invoke the Holocaust as an excuse for what they're doing, or weaponize false smears of anti-Care Bearism to shut down any questioning of what they're doing. And then just today, Care Bear media reports claim a top Hamas negotiator was targeted in Doha, Qatar. Are the Care Bears trying to resurrect Pan-Arabianism or something? They've bombed Qatar, Tunisia, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon all in the same week, while pretending to be perpetual victims, while endlessly invoking something that happened over 80 years ago, allegedly. This is their behavior, though. So they actually pretend to be victims while they're striking out and attacking 5 other places at the same time. It's so outrageous that you could not make it up even if you wanted to. We have the potato here who has never learned his lesson. A black man murdered a Ukrainian refugee and proclaimed immediately after that he, quote, got that white girl. The CNN today saying, the open racism on sites like Twitter is eye-popping. This is the nonsense that we have to deal with. The problem is never the disproportionate racial violence against white people. The real problem is white people noticing it, according to the media. CNN panel shows sympathy for the man who stabbed Irina in the throat and shames people for calling this a racial attack. Van Jones claimed that there was no evidence she was attacked because of her race. Audio footage, however, reveals the man bragged about how he got a white girl immediately after he did it. They say for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering, and it's wrong. Right. Unreal. Like, you could not make this up if you wanted to. This is where we are at. The Care Bears bombing Doha, claiming they are striking, quote, Hamas leadership office. Historic Care Bear action in Qatar. The IDF attacks Hamas leadership in Doha, 1,800 kilometers from the Care Bear nation, with heavy bombs escorted by drones. Explosions were heard in the capital of Qatar. The negotiating delegation met to discuss the president's proposal, and then the Care Bears attacked. Almost like they don't want to deal, almost like they don't care about the hostages, because they target the people who are trying to meet to negotiate a release of those hostages. The assassination attempt targeted Khalil al-Hayya, Zahir Jabirin, Ghazi Hamad, and Bassem Naim. The operation was conducted by the Occupation Army in Shin Bet. They can't use Qatari airspace, among other things, without coordinating with the Americans, as we have a big base there. American and British reconnaissance planes were in the sky over Qatar before the operation was carried out. Al Jazeera reporting Khalil al-Hayya was not present. Hamas leadership source to Al Jazeera, the delegation was targeted in a Care Bear airstrike during a meeting to discuss the president's latest proposal. Make no mistake, this brazen attempt is part of the negotiations. Yemeni drones are moving over Eilat, and there are reports one is near Ramman Airport again. A senior Hamas leader to al-Mayadeen reiterates all Hamas leadership members in Doha are safe after the aggression that attempted to unalive them. So isn't that fascinating? This is what they're doing constantly. Think about the civilians in the area, and the fact that there's Americans, by the way, in there as well, I find fascinating. Early indications that the violent raid may have unalived a group of foreign workers and some staff members who were present at an office. The Care Bears have not given an assessment. Qatar announces suspension of mediation between the Care Bears and Hamas. Khalil al-Hayya's son was reportedly unalived in the attack with the office director. Unreal. Unbelievable. Bibi prevents government ministers from making a statement until further notice. Barack Ravid confirms that the administration in America was briefed on the operation beforehand, while Bibi is giving repeated statements saying this was entirely independent action by the Care Bears. This is a moment of impact from a CCTV camera. You know, you could not make this up if you wanted to. U.S. Embassy in Doha has issued a shelter-in-place order for American citizens. Kurt Mills says, yeah, not like this will protect anyone from the Care Bears trying to unalive them in their own homes, or stop stenographers in America and in the administration from defending the action if the Care Bears did just openly unalive Americans. Truly, are we really so far from that? Obviously not. Qatari government has released a statement in response saying that they condemn in the harshest terms the cowardly Care Bear attack that targeted residential compounds housing several members of the political bureau of Hamas in the Qatari capital, Doha. Yep, yeah. Then we have this insanity coming from the left. Jeffrey saying that J6 is the same as Pearl Harbor and 9/11. We saw it with our own eyes. Yeah. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. This is just the insanity of this. Then we have finally a Whitmer-appointed judge, a black woman, who is finally going after Dana Nessel for her corruption. You love to see it. The Whitmer-appointed judge dunked so hard on Dana Nessel at one point the courtroom burst into laughter. So this was the ridiculous and political case brought by Dana Nessel against alternate electors in Michigan. Many of these individuals were elderly. She was trying to put them in jail for like 15 to 20 years, just like she did to the Whitmer guys she helped frame. Justice prevails against lawfare in Michigan. Today, a Lansing District Court dismissed the sham, politically motivated charges against Clifford Frost Jr. brought by radical Michigan AG Dana Nessel, exposing her blatant abuse of power to weaponize the justice system against conservatives, prosecuting alternate electors on bogus forgery charges, despite the Michigan Attorney General admitting on video they lack specific criminal intent, shopping the bogus case to prosecutors and DOJ who all declined to act, and then pursuing it years later as revenge and political lawfare. This vindicates Frost and indicts Nessel's deranged crusade to silence any dissent to advance her extreme ideology. As Michigan's next AG, I will end partisan witch hunts, restore equal justice under the law. Well, what you need to do, Kevin, if you are seeking to replace Dana Nessel as a Republican Attorney General, the first thing you need to promise to do is to investigate what Dana Nessel did in the Whitmer Fednapping hoax. But that's a good thing. You love to see it. Ryan Grimm says, here's what just happened. Trump sent a peace deal to Hamas. Hamas met to discuss it in Doha, where the U.S. is mediating talks and has a base, and the Care Bears bombed them, presumably with U.S. support. The strike in Doha was aimed at Hamas negotiators who were gathered to discuss the ceasefire offer, according to a Hamas official speaking on Al Jazeera. Much as the president carried out fake nuclear talks with Iran in order to facilitate the unaliving of Iranian negotiators. That might explain why the president's offer was so short and scant on details. The whole point was to gather people together to discuss the peace offer and then unalive them. The Care Bears are taking credit for the attack, citing 10/7, though most or all in Doha didn't even know about this until it happened. Yeah, isn't that interesting? And then they brag about it. It's just crazy, guys. Mike Johnson says he doesn't know anything about the Care Bears strike on Qatar, and that, quote, Hamas has to be eradicated. You've got to remove the threat on the immediate border, frankly, within the bounds of Israel. Well, Mike Johnson, why don't you ask your buddy Netanyahu why he was funding and arming them, why he had a policy in place to support Hamas in order to weaken the PLO. That was a long-standing practice, and why members of Netanyahu's cabinet were caught sending money to Hamas via Qatar in advance of October 7. You should ask also why, when they were warned a year in advance that 10/7 was going to happen, why, when they were warned 3 days in advance by Egypt that it was going to happen, they chose to do nothing and in fact ordered people to stand down because they wanted it to happen so they could use it as justification to enact their final solution for Gaza. The 400 richest people in the United States are now worth a record $6.6 trillion after getting 1.2 trillion richer over the past year. Wealth inequality just continues to skyrocket, and this is not sustainable. Another thing that should be noted here, the Care Bears targeted senior members of Hamas leadership in a strike today, as the Care Bear military and Shin Bet domestic intelligence service said, and he reminds people that Qatar agreed to host the Hamas political office in Doha and pay civil service salaries in Gaza before 2023 with the explicit support of the Care Bear Nation and the United States. Not because Qatar openly supports Hamas, but because everyone agreed it was useful to have a space to talk. Care Bear journalist and academic Mir Mazri, today Qatar, tomorrow Turkey. The Care Bears are fighting terrorism by being terrorists and bombing people and unaliving, civilians and children. And they've already done, attacks on 5 different countries in 1 week. Now they're saying that Turkey is going to be tomorrow. I mean, it's just outrageous, guys. And it's not defensible at this point. That type of aggression and hostility is insane. And then we have this, of course, from yesterday, the Times of Israel. Trump reportedly tasks Jared Kushner with composing the day-after plan for Gaza. Jared Kushner, of course, who was talking 1 year ago about how Gaza has a really potentially valuable waterfront property. And of course, Kushner is involved in real estate development, so this would be, of course, a conflict of interest. The president is tasking his son-in-law Kushner with composing a plan for the day after the war in Gaza. Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer met with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Kushner in Miami today to discuss the ceasefire proposal and the U.S. day after plan, according to the network, which reported Kushner is emerging as a central figure in crafting U.S. plans for the future of Gaza. The Care Bears will have influence, but it won't be the Bibi plan or the Dermer plan, a U.S. official tells Channel 12. No, it'll be the Kushner plan. And remember, Kushner was so close to Bibi that as a child, Bibi would come stay at their house and sleep in his bed. Kushner was a senior advisor during the first administration from 2017 to 2021 and was central to brokering the Abraham Accords, the normalization agreements between the Care Bears and several Arab countries. He does not currently hold an official position, but we all know he's there in the shadows, maneuvering as he always does. So make of that what you will. Kushner getting his valuable waterfront property. Then we have this sign of the times. All kidding aside, if gold has regained status as a predictor of future events, and it has, and some very, very big players are hedging some future risk, they are, this is actually something to be concerned about. This is not some random behavior. Look at gold, guys. What you see happening here is a currency on the verge of collapse. People recognizing that and moving out of the dollar. Spencer Hakiman, the dollar has lost 50% of its value versus gold in just the past 3 years. 50%. Understand where we are. You now live in a third world country. Yes, essentially. JP Morgan hikes gold price from $4,000 to $4,200 next year. Unbelievable. Gold could surge as high as $4,250 an ounce next year amid uncertainty over the Fed, JP Morgan. And then we have this, the latest coming out about Jeffrey. It is so insane. You could not make this up if you wanted to. An image so cartoonishly evil, it feels like it was ripped from a subplot in True Detective. This is like I mean, when you question why we are so subservient to this foreign country in the Middle East, this image should tell you everything you need to know. And then we have this, the contents of Epstein's birthday book. Yep. There's a lot of information in here, and people are disputing the letter in there that is from President Trump. But, I mean, there's scans of this book. This was released. Epstein and longtime Mar-a-Lago member joking about selling a, quote, fully depreciated woman to Trump for $22,500. Now, obviously, the stuff in this book it's supposed to be jokes for Epstein's 50th birthday, but it is still very weird, very bizarre. No, I don't believe the president gave Jeffrey Epstein a ridiculously large, check to purchase a woman. That's ridiculous. But this is kind of revealing in itself of Jeffrey Epstein and who his associates were. Trump and Clinton both get a mention here, and look at this is so creepy. The pictures in here, very bizarre. Before Jeffrey, I was a 22-year-old divorcee working as a hostess in a hotel restaurant. Oh, great. What a great country. Is this depicting Epstein grooming children? This is haunting. So this is one of the pages here. It's got the Lolita Express on it, pictures of women, possibly a child. Very bizarre. And then this image, 1983. I mean, that's obviously him and children. There's the Lolita Express here. To 2003. What a great country. I mean, this is just like, it is so nuts. I don't even know what to say. Two very young girls, probable just 17 plus, were riding in my father's caddy. Park Ave, top down, smooching it up in the car, drop dead laughing. What an odd thing to say. Girls on my boat. We picked up girls on the beach, went out on boat. I tell them, with knife in my hand, to take their suits off, but Warren tells them, don't worry, his name is JN, he's just joking. Wow. I tell Mark to throw him into the water, he did. How bizarre. How disturbing. Castaways, Volume 1. I'm not even gonna read this stuff. It is so creepy. You can just see it yourself. Yeah, the Interlochen School, we all remember that. Very odd. Dearest Jeffrey, 50 years old, you really have had a pretty amazing life. Amazing because of where and when it started. Paula and Seymour effing. Who was there to tell them where to stick it? Who told him to spit on... Yeah. Maybe they had more on the ball than we all give them credit for, it says. Like, this is so creepy. The contents of these letters reveal that these individuals knew exactly what Epstein was doing. Anyway, from that night, back in May of 1953, as they laid there, intoxicated from their lovemaking, little did they know what they would be bringing into the world early the next year. Let's fast forward to you. Like, what a creepy thing to say. And it just gets even creepier. I'm not even going to read this because it's so disturbing. Wow. Waiting for my foot massage. Oh my goodness. Then there's this section, labeled children, essentially. And there's a lot of coded messages in here. I mean, for the people who were looking at, like, Pizzagate, I mean, my goodness. Look no further than this crap. Alan Dershowitz, what a sicko. Dershowitz, 2002. Dear Jeffrey, as a birthday gift to you, I managed to obtain an early version of the Vanity Unfair article. I talked them into changing the focus from you to Bill Clinton, as you will see from the enclosed excerpt. Happy birthday. Best regards, Alan. And I find it interesting that we have Nicole Kidman on the cover here, because I just think immediately of Eyes Wide Shut. It's no secret that Jeffrey appreciates beautiful women, but not many people know he can create them out of thin air. At least he did in Iowa in 1988. What an odd thing to say. At the time, I was managing the money for the Zimmerman family, and they lived in Fairfield, Iowa, a town of less than 10,000 people. Between Ottumwa and Burlington, hog farming is a serious industry there, and many feel there is more than a little truth to the saying that it's hard to tell the difference between the girls and the hogs in southeast Iowa. I had invited Jeffrey to come to Fairfield to see our investment operations, meet the Zimmerman family, and learn more about their major charitable projects. He asked about the nightlife, and we could only laugh as we dropped him off at the local motel. The next morning, a group of 4 of us picked up Jeffrey to give him a tour of the area. Our first stop, we parked in front of a bookstore. As we were getting out of the car, a spectacular tall blonde woman suddenly came out of the store, walking directly past us up to Jeffrey, and announced, "I am new to this area. What's going on?" It turned out she was a sale representative for a firm selling academic-branded athletic clothing. And she was literally driving through Iowa, visiting local campuses. Jeffrey invited her to join us and did his magic. Within a few hours, he had invited her to return to New York with him for the weekend. What a strange story. I mean, like, the idea that that happened. Photos of animals doing things and of their genitalia. How nice. Weird poems about Jeffrey avoiding the penitentiary. Ooh, it was too soon. Dear Jeffrey, I wanted to get you what you want, so here it is, a drawing of boobs. Yeah, a lot of the messages are very coded, leaving you with some quote-unquote interesting friends to entertain instead. And is that Mendelssohn back there? Very creepy. Huh. Or in one of his glorious homes he likes to share with his friends. Yum yum. Picture of Little St. James. Boob prints, commissioned by Henry Rosovsky, former Faculty of Arts and Sciences Dean of Harvard University. Unreal. Wow. I'm not even I can't even read this one. Oh my goodness. Can't get a second of privacy without you and a camera around. Haha. Wow. Just wow. With your old and I am friend, a shopping tip. Very bizarre. So anyways, this is where we're at, and that glance at that birthday book I think is quite revealing as to why we are in a state of subservience to a rogue state in the Middle East, and it's quite obvious that's what's going on. And like we covered about the art students prior to September 11, I would just encourage people to look more into P-Tech, Kroll and Associates, to look into Dove Zackheim, Systems Planning Corporation, and other players that were very clearly involved in what happened and all have ties to the Care Bear Nation and their intelligence apparatus. So that is it. Just continuing to document where we are as this country continues its decline. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, guys. It is very dark. The people in these positions of power, and in the background, of course, we have the Palantir, total information, global surveillance state being built around us. And these tools of digital suppression and control being pushed through in the NDAA. We have that provision for a moratorium against regulating AI that they were not able to get passed in the big, beautiful bill. So that's also concerning. But I'm interested to know what you guys think, and I hope you have a good day.